to campaign for independence. And I think from everybody I spoke to, the resounding response was no. What they should do is take that energy and join their local groups, whether that's regionally or their own interest groups, whether that's LGBYT or Creative Scots or New Scots or whatever it is. So I think that's a crucial question that will need to be resolved quite quickly. Is there going to be a separate RIC campaign? And my own feeling is that would be a big mistake.
Okay, and one other thing I'd like to get the opinion of all three of you. One thing that came out of it, and it's also been discussed in previous podcasts, is the idea that working class people are much more likely to vote for independence going by the polls. However, they're much less likely to vote. And I was following the Twitter feed all day, and apparently in one of the sessions, someone was calling for mass voter registration campaigns. I'd just like to know what you all thought about that. Andrew?
Yes, that was certainly an argument that was being made, and I think this feeds into something that I have said before, but I will say again. But about the usefulness of something like a radical independence campaign. Now, I mean, the organised left in Scotland is not a political force to be reckoned with. I mean, in terms of their election in local government, in terms of their election to Holyrood.
There's a latent force, though, there, Andrew.
No.
Definitely a latent force.
No, I would agree with that. All I'm saying is, I suppose, is that it would be important not to overstate perhaps the potency of this particular grouping in terms of sort of delivering a yes vote. But I think it is really important to emphasise, as Carolyn says there, that there is a latent left-wing voice in terms of Scottish politics, which actually people can address. And it's important, I think, in terms of thinking about advocacy for independence, to recognise that not everyone will be convinced by the same arguments, and some people will be convinced by independence for arguments which are totally incompatible with those which others are convinced by. You get some pro-independence Tories now and then, who obviously would have a very kind of different neoliberal conception of what they would like an independent Scotland to look like. And I think in terms of convincing different parts of Scotland that independence is the way forward for them, that actually folk involved through the left and a left-wing argument for independence is a really good thing. And the fact that the left seems so united around independence also has an interesting impact on just the general debate about who's going to be criticising nationalists and from which political angle. And I think that's, for me, just sociologically, politically, one of the kind of more extraordinary things that the left in Scotland, whether it's environmental, socialist, whatever, seems so united around this proposition. I think we shouldn't be too cavalier about that as a kind of historical curiosity.
And Carolyn, what do you think about the voter registration idea?
Women for Independence last meeting actually discussed that, and it is going to be definitely a huge exercise to get people who don't normally vote, one, to think that there's a point of voting, and two, to risk the people who are chasing them for debts finding them by registering, which is a huge thing. Poverty, Bright House, all of these. So for people to risk being chased for debts, there are many, many people in that situation who don't go on the voters' roll because they've escaped debts at a different address. They're going to have an awful lot of hope for the future, that it is worth risking that by registering and voting yes. So that, Andrew's absolutely right, that whole constituency who are attracted to the idea of independence because of the possibilities it offers need to be motivated, and that definitely requires a movement whose priority is that whole swathe of people. And it's certainly in terms of the mainstream parties who are always campaigning around the centre ground, that's not their priority. It's not going to be their priority. So somebody's going to have to do it. And so in terms of whether the Radical Independence Conference or Women for Independence or other groups that appear are entryist and somehow represent a threat to the Yes campaign, I think it's the absolute opposite that is true. I think the Yes campaign needs other groups and diverse groups, no matter how they organise. I think spontaneously I would agree that it should be part of the broader Yes campaign, whether it be in terms of the critical friends or whatever, but I don't think there's any point in creating new structures there. So I think there's a huge job to be done, and I think it's interesting that when you actually put questions to people who support the status quo or the United Kingdom about what is the alternative, They really struggle when it's a progressive vision that is put forward in terms of independence and the hope that independence could offer. Possibility is not guaranteed at all. About is it more likely that Scotland as an independent country would be progressive as opposed to a United Kingdom being progressive? What's most likely? What are the balance of probabilities? And what can you offer as an alternative? I had an interesting Twitter discussion that was brief because it was curtailed by sort of clumsy tweeting by pro-independence person, but that the alternative was being put forward, which isn't even Labour Party policy, of federalism. Do you know? So I think that exposes the difference here, and I do think that independence is a progressive alternative and the UK is a regressive alternative. And I think there's a whole constituency of people who that will appeal to.
Okay. And any thoughts on that, Mike?
I'm writing about this later today because it was kind of my talk was really on the idea of hope as the rejection of the status quo. And I was speaking to somebody the other day saying, one of the differences between the Yes and the No campaign is that Yes does have thousands of people who are passionate about this every weekend campaigning on this issue. I really don't think the No campaign does have that.
Well, sorry. Just when you're saying that, someone was tweeting, you'd have been in the conference, so you wouldn't have noticed it, but someone was saying that while you were all in the hotel, there was people in Buchanan Street from the No campaign, and they were saying, what a successful event, next to pictures of people looking cold and miserable that were also being tweeted. I just thought I'd get that.
We can't all hold our political rallies at the Radisson.
All right.
But I think that idea of possibility of change and aspiration to change is a crucial way of shifting the framing of the debate, because at the moment the No campaign is very happy to frame this as a dead end. One possibility, the outcome is independence, and you'll be stuck with it. And I think when you change it to talking about possibility, the ground of possibility, and opening up what people's aspirations are, and you see it in a different way, which is looking at what a whole range of possibilities in the future might be. I think that's a completely different way of conceptualizing it.
Okay, and I suppose after that we should move on to our second topic of the day, and I think we'll probably just have the two today. But one, I thought it was very interesting. There's going to be this meeting with the Conservative Friends of the Union for £750 a head. And this is bringing us back to something we've discussed before, which is campaign funding. And although there's going to be very strict limits set on the official campaigns, we talked about how campaign funding is a very, very murky issue. And apparently this group has a six-figure sum. And I had a look this morning on searchthemoney.com, which is a very useful website. And that they say that six-figure sum's just short of 400 grand, and have a list of where that's coming from, which are mostly English Conservative MPs. And there's also other groups, like there's the London Scottish Conservative Club and various other groups and strangely, this kind of reminded me of any of you ever been to the Wallace Monument and read all the stuff inside it? And it talks about how, the government were against it, and it was actually kind of funded by donations, like normal people just clubbing in to actually pay for the thing. And this kind of reminded me of that. A lot of the Yes campaign's money is coming from small donations from normal people, whereas there's all these kind of little conservative clubs, and this is where also ties in with what Andrew said earlier about how you've got the left kind of uniting around independence, and who's going to be this constituency and groups that are coming against it. So we're back to kind of campaign funding. What do you think of these kind of English conservative groups getting involved? We'll start with Andrew, I think.
Well, I think they're perfectly entitled to be involved. I mean, I think from their perspective, their conception of state, their conception of nation as probably British nationalists with a kind of also Scottish nationalist aspects, many of them too. That's how they see it. That's how they see the political controversy. And I don't expect English Tories or Scottish Tories in England to pursue the logic of the Scottish National Party. I think it is fair to say that we have a kind of balance of funding in terms of the campaign, and I thought it was interesting what Gary said last week about the interests of nationalists maybe in spending soaking this campaign in money. But for me, I think we can't be po-faced about these cash raising enterprises down south. It's to be expected, but also I think it's quite legitimate in terms of their constitutional argument, their political convictions.
Well, I think Carolyn's got a lot more kind of parliamentary experience than any of us. So what do you like? Do you find that campaign or party funding is a very murky world? Did you find out a lot about it when you were there?
Well, it's hard to know exactly how parties are funded. The published accounts don't really tell you very much in terms of where it's coming from, and there's a lot of informal stuff that goes on that is probably not necessarily declared. My immediate response to the Tories all sitting down at 750 quid a head in favour of the union, as long as we know about it, I think it's counterproductive, and I think that generally working class people, will recoil at that, and it's more likely to propel people to vote yes.
Yeah, I mean that may be true. I mean, it sounds bad, and you kind of imagine, the sort of the semiotics are poor, black tie dinners, and so on. But then again, I mean, you can imagine very similar gatherings happening around nationalists. Actually, many in terms of research which has been conducted around who Scottish members of the Scottish National Party are. They are many of them are middle class folk who don't identify as middle class, which is quite interesting. So it's not perhaps surprising that you could have pretty big bonanza cash raising enterprises on pretty much all sides of this campaign, albeit not perhaps in the folk around the Radical Independence conference. But again, that was in the Radisson, so I mean there's sort of an entertaining ironies around these things.
That was funded by the 800 or so people who attended, paying fees, which is I suppose quite different. I kind of think that in any political campaign that individual donations should probably be limited so that huge donors who aren't able to really corrupt the process by their money. But I'm not sure how much big advertising budgets, for example, will make the difference in this campaign. I do think it will be about people talking to each other in their houses, in their living rooms, in their workplaces and in their communities. And, if you've got 800 or 900 people at the Radical Independence Conference and hundreds of people who have been in touch with Women for Independence, for example, and conducting our listening exercises, which is very much based on talking to real people in their communities and hoping to reach everybody in that very real way rather than blasting an advert out of a TV screen. I don't want to minimise the effect of advertising, but I really don't think that that's going to be the thing that will win this. People do. Yeah,
I would agree with that. What do you think about that, Mike?
I think it's great news. Obviously, it was a bit steep, £750 a head. But no, I think it's fantastic news. If the papers get hold of it and the Tories, if the No campaign is being funded by Conservative Friends of the Union in Chelsea, great. I don't think you could really ask for a better offer. So fantastic news.
Do you know that one of them was actually called, I think it's the United and Cecil Club. You couldn't actually make it up.
Dear.
That's nice. So was the strategy to make Jacob Rees-Mogg the poster boy of the No campaign?
Oh, I know, they should. They should.
Something I wondered about, just on this point about activism and practical activism in order to deliver independence. Now, and I don't know if this is convincing, so I'd be interested to see what any of you think about this. It's often said that nationalists are all fired up. This is their goal, that they're likely to go out in the streets, go door to door, go through the workplaces, talk to folk. But people like the Labour Party, who are going to have to bear the burden of this campaign, insistently tell us that they are not nationalists, that they are, instrumental socialists, some of them, and that the union is not their political, there's not the kind of thing that fires them up. Now, I don't think that's particularly convincing, but that's the kind of thesis. And as a result, you might expect that the activist base in the Labour Party, such as it still is, might not actually be all that fired up for this campaign. And as a result, the No forces might be, bussing up activists, student activists, Labour students from the universities in the north of England, south of England, whatever. And I just sort of wondered what impact that might have. Having met, Oxford Tories down here, I'm not entirely sure I'd want them at the forefront of my campaign to keep the union together.
No, they're complaining about being marginalised, are they not?
They are, yes. How they suffer. The poor lambs are saying that they want the same protection. I forget which college it's at, as sort of LGBT groups and things like that, because they're faced with the same culture of intimidation and hostility.
This is the marginalised rich white males again.
Yeah.
They suffer a lot.
It's a shame. It's a real shame for them, isn't it?